Back here in South Texas, this year's cotton crop is projected to be one of the best ever. Despite the good news, one group of farmers warns it may be hard to move because of the China-U.S. tariff war. The Cotton Growers Warehouse Association had its yearly meeting this weekend at the Omni Hotel. The hottest topic had to do with all of the cotton that is going to be harvested later this summer. 3/4 of the cotton grown in the U.S. is exported to other countries. The Cotton Growers Group represents roughly 40% of warehouses in the country and say there is a true financial worry.
News has learned the Trump administration could announce a multi-billion-dollar financial relief package this week for farmers being hurt by the president's trade war with China.
Some of that tariff money that we made, we're going to give it to our farmers who are, for a little while, going to be hurt until it kicks in. The tariffs kick into their benefit. So we're going to make sure that our farmers are in great shape because we're taking in a lot of money.
Something big just happened and most Americans haven't realized it yet. For decades, American cotton built China's factories. U.S. farmers grew it, shipped it across the ocean, and China turned it into the clothes the whole world wears. But now, China has quietly cut off American cotton and turned to Africa instead. Why? Because Beijing no longer wants to depend on U.S. farms. Instead, they're investing millions of dollars into African cotton fields in countries like Benin, Burkina Faso, and Mali, turning Africa into their new cotton empire. And here's the part that's got American farmers furious. They didn't see it coming. Prices are falling, exports are shrinking, and China, once their biggest buyer, just walked away. This isn't just another trade story, it's a quiet economic war. A move that could change who controls the world's clothing industry and leave thousands of American farmers behind. Because when China cuts you off, it's never just business. It's strategy. For more than 40 years, cotton has been one of the quiet engines of American agriculture. From the rolling fields of Texas to the Delta plains of Mississippi, generations of farmers have planted, picked, and shipped bales of white gold across the world. And for most of that time, one country stood as the biggest and most dependable buyer: China. Every year, millions of bales of U.S. cotton were loaded onto ships bound for Chinese ports. There, in massive textile cities like Guangzhou and Zhejiang, that cotton was spun into thread and fabric, then turned into t-shirts, jeans, and bedsheets that ended up on store shelves everywhere from New York to Nairobi. Cotton was more than a crop, it was a bridge connecting America's farms to China's factories. But that bridge is breaking. Over the past few years, Beijing has quietly shifted its strategy. Instead of depending on U.S. cotton, China is moving its focus south toward Africa. And for American farmers, that shift feels like a betrayal. The fields are still full, the harvests are still coming in, but the buyers are disappearing. China, once their lifeline, is walking away. To understand why, you have to look back at how politics and economics collided. When the U.S. and China went head-to-head in the trade war of 2018, cotton was one of the first casualties. Washington raised tariffs on Chinese goods, and Beijing hit back by taxing U.S. farm exports. Overnight, American cotton became more expensive for Chinese buyers. The response in Beijing was simple: find new suppliers. That's when Africa entered the picture. Across the Sahel region of West Africa, in countries like Benin, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Chad, cotton is already known as white gold. Millions of small farmers depend on it. Yet for years, Africa's cotton industry suffered from low investment, weak infrastructure, and dependence on Western aid. China saw an opportunity. Instead of just buying African cotton, it decided to build the entire supply chain there, from seed to spinning mill. Chinese state companies and private investors began offering funding to African governments, building ginneries, warehouses, and textile plants. In Benin alone, new Chinese-backed facilities now process thousands of tons of cotton that used to go abroad. Chinese engineers train local workers, while African farmers sign long-term contracts that guarantee buyers for their harvests. In return, Beijing secures a steady, affordable source of cotton free from U.S. tariffs and political tension. For China, the logic is simple. Why rely on America when you can control your own supply chain? Inside China, there's another layer to the story. The country produces a huge amount of its own cotton, mainly from the Xinjiang region in the northwest. But that region has become a political flashpoint. The U.S. government accused Beijing of using forced labor in Xinjiang and banned cotton products made there. China responded angrily, calling it interference in its domestic affairs. The result was a standoff. Washington banned Xinjiang cotton, and China began reducing purchases from American producers. Caught in the middle are U.S. farmers, who suddenly have fewer places to sell their crop. Texas, the heart of American cotton, has been hit hard. Many farmers there say they're struggling to make a profit because export orders are drying up. Some have been forced to cut back on planting, while others turn to different crops altogether. The promise that global trade would keep their farms alive is starting to feel like a broken deal. Meanwhile, African farmers are seeing new hope. Chinese financing is helping them modernize equipment, improve irrigation, and boost yields. In some regions, production has doubled within a few years. Beijing isn't just buying raw cotton, it's helping Africa climb the value chain, building factories where the cotton is woven and dyed before being exported. That means more jobs, more tax revenue, and more political goodwill toward China. But behind every new opportunity lies a deeper strategy. China's long-term goal isn't just to replace U.S. cotton. It's to build an alternative trading system where it no longer needs the West at all. By investing heavily in Africa's cotton and textile industries, China can secure clothing materials for its domestic market while tightening its grip on global apparel manufacturing. If American cotton is cut off, it barely matters. The new supply lines will already be running through Africa and Asia. In Washington, trade officials have watched these developments with concern. The U.S. once viewed its farm exports as a source of global influence. Selling soybeans, wheat, and cotton wasn't just about profit. It was about maintaining leverage. If other countries depended on U.S. agriculture, they were less likely to challenge American power. But now that leverage is fading. What makes the situation more painful for U.S. farmers is that they did nothing wrong. They didn't start the trade war. They didn't impose tariffs. Yet they're paying the price. Many in rural America feel abandoned by both Beijing and Washington. Some are calling for government support to find new markets in places like India or Southeast Asia, but replacing China's massive demand is nearly impossible in the short term. At the same time, the numbers tell a clear story. Just a few years ago, China bought nearly 40% of all U.S. cotton exports. Today, that figure has fallen dramatically. African countries, by contrast, have seen their cotton exports to China surge. The so-called cotton for Benin, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Chad now supply millions of bales annually. New trade deals are being signed quietly, without headlines, but with huge consequences. From Beijing's perspective, this is smart geopolitics. Africa provides cheap land, abundant labor, and governments eager for investment. By securing African cotton, China not only avoids U.S. tariffs but also wins diplomatic allies across the continent. Each cotton deal doubles as a foreign policy handshake, one that helps China strengthen its Belt and Road network. For African leaders, the arrangement has upsides and risks. On one hand, Chinese partnerships bring jobs and infrastructure. On the other, they can deepen dependence on Beijing's financing and political favor. Some economists warn that Africa could end up exporting raw cotton while China controls the profitable manufacturing side, repeating the same imbalance that Africa faced with Europe in colonial times. But for now, many African countries see no better alternative. Back in the United States, cotton farmers are trying to adapt. Some are selling more to Turkey, Vietnam, and Bangladesh, countries that still rely on U.S. cotton for high-quality textile production. Others are lobbying Congress for new subsidies or incentives to offset lost Chinese demand. Yet the overall picture remains uncertain. When one of your biggest buyers walks away, the global market doesn't easily fill the gap. Beyond economics, there's a cultural sting. Cotton has deep roots in American history. It's tied to the identity of the South, to hard work, family farms, and generations of resilience. Losing that global leadership role feels like losing a piece of national pride. When farmers watch Chinese and African officials shaking hands over new cotton deals, it feels like they're watching their own future shrink. In Beijing, the government frames it differently. Officials there say the shift is part of a broader effort to diversify supply chains and strengthen South-South cooperation. In other words, China wants to build trade networks that connect developing regions directly, bypassing Western dominance. Cotton is just one example of how that strategy works. First, identify a vital resource like cotton for textiles or cobalt for batteries. Then invest heavily in regions that have it, offer infrastructure loans, and lock in long-term contracts. By doing so, China ensures its factories never run short of materials, while its partners become economically tied to Beijing's orbit. For U.S. farmers, that means competing not only against lower prices but also against an entire political system designed to favor China's allies. The impact extends beyond rural America. U.S. ports, shipping companies, and textile mills all feel the ripple effects. When exports fall, jobs in logistics and processing drop too. The cotton industry supports tens of thousands of workers, ginners, truckers, warehouse operators, and many of them now face uncertain futures. Some American analysts argue that Washington should counter with its own investments in Africa, offering alternatives to Chinese loans and trade deals. If Africa's cotton sector is rising, the U.S. could partner directly with those nations rather than ceding influence completely. Others say the best solution is to rebuild domestic textile capacity so American cotton can be processed and sold locally instead of relying on exports. Meanwhile, on African soil, the transformation is accelerating. Chinese-built textile zones are popping up from Ethiopia to Nigeria. In Benin, a massive industrial park funded by Chinese investors is expected to create thousands of jobs in spinning, weaving, and dyeing. Local officials boast that for the first time in decades, Africa might not just grow cotton but actually turn it into finished fabric and garments. That's exactly what China wants: a network of partners who can supply, process, and trade with one another under its leadership. For Beijing, cotton isn't just a crop. It's a diplomatic tool, a development weapon, and a symbol of a world shifting away from U.S. control. The irony is that while China and Africa grow closer, many of the clothes made from African cotton will still end up in Western stores. Consumers buying made in Africa or made in China tags may never realize that the cotton once came from Texas or Georgia before geopolitics changed everything. As the dust settles, the story of cotton becomes a warning about global interdependence. When trade turns political, even the most ordinary crops can become weapons. The same pattern is playing out with soybeans, corn, and rare minerals. But cotton is different because it carries history, identity, and emotion. American farmers now face a crossroads. Some hope that future trade deals or political changes could reopen China's market. Others are looking toward technology developing better yields, sustainable cotton, and local textile startups to stay competitive. But they all agree on one thing: the days of depending on China are over. For Africa, this is a chance to reshape its role in the global economy. If managed wisely, the new cotton boom could empower local industries and reduce poverty. But if managed poorly, it could create new forms of dependency, with China replacing the West as the dominant power. For China, the strategy is already paying off. Its factories remain supplied, its global image in Africa is growing, and its economy is less exposed to U.S. trade pressure. In a world where control over resources means control over influence, Beijing has played its hand well. And for the rest of the world, the shift reveals a new reality. Global trade is no longer just about who can grow what, it is about who controls the story behind it. When you look at those endless cotton fields in Texas or Mississippi today, you're not just seeing a farm. You're seeing the front line of a silent economic battle, one where China is already winning ground. The next time someone says it's just cotton, remember this: behind every bale is a network of ships, factories, and politics connecting continents. And when China decides to pull one thread, the entire fabric of global trade begins to unravel. That is what makes this story more than economics. It is the story of how a single crop reveals who is really shaping the future of world power.